John, why is this so serious? It was an unmanned vehicle and in international waters.
Well, this is not the sort of thing that happens every day. Certainly, you could argue that this is an escalation of the diplomatic tensions that we've seen between the U.S. And China over the last few weeks, as that followed on from some of those slightly provocative tweets that we saw from President-elect Trump. And it is this, as I said, this thing doesn't sort of happen every day, and it is, of course, in the contested South China Sea, which about 50 miles from the coast of the Philippines. So the information that we have at the moment is still relatively sketchy, and we'll have to see how this plays out. But like I say, this is certainly an escalation.
John, help us understand the contestedness of this particular part of the world. We watched as a tribunal in the Netherlands issued a ruling a few months back about the contested nature of this area, both China and the Philippines fighting over islands here, other countries involved as well. How fragile is the sense of peace in this area?
I mean, no one is suggesting that anyone is there's going to be military conflict anytime soon over this contested part of the South China Sea. Nevertheless, having said that, we are, as I said, the diplomatic tensions between the U.S. and China have risen up more than a notch in the last few weeks. The question of Taiwan is, of course, extremely important as a core interest of the Chinese nation. So I think while we might not, this is probably not going to be the precursor to any serious military exchange. It could be certainly the beginning of both sides, and especially the Chinese, being prepared to show their naval muscle in that part of the world.
John, how much do we know about maritime rules of engagement here? I mean, there were international waters, so presumably there's, China vessels in there, and there's also U.S. vessels. Was either side encroaching on something that it shouldn't have been? Do we know that yet? And, yeah.
We don't have those details yet, but again, it's important. I mean, these are contested waters, right? So there is this question about, was it really? China would argue this isn't really international waters at all. This is, this is our territory, so to speak. And of course, this is one of those issues there where the U.S. claimed this was an unlawful seizing of their drone, but China will say no. This is encroaching on our waters, and we have a full right to do this. So that will be, that obviously is sort of the big bone of contention there. And it's one of those diplomatic questions to which both sides will obviously very much disagree on where this actually happened and who has sovereignty over those waters, and that that sort of contention could keep this going for days or even weeks to come.
You mentioned the drone. It's being characterized as an UUV, an underwater unmanned vehicle, an ocean glider. What do we know about the particular piece of technology itself? And I imagine there are concerns probably about the proprietary nature of the equipment that's been taken.
That's for sure, and it is a very sort of conventional piece of equipment. This is the sort of thing that you would use to sort of measure, salt, salinity levels in the waters, or temperature. It's very, it's an oceanographic drone. So it's not, it's hard to sort of argue, certainly on the face of the evidence that we have in front of us, that this could be used for any sort of military purposes. But I think the bigger picture is not necessarily, what this drone was. It's the symbolism of it. I think is the most important thing. The U.S. radioed the Chinese vessel that seized the glider, asked for it back, and China is refusing. So I think that's sort of what I would look at. It's the nature of the standoff, so to speak, the nature of the disagreement that I would focus on, rather than rather than the relatively trivial matter of what actually happened. It's the diplomatic symbolism.
Yeah, and John, what happens next now on the U.S. side? Because the Chinese are obviously not about to give in. It's too embarrassing, and anyway, they've clearly taken a stance. They don't want to give in. So what kind of response could the U.S. come up with that satisfies everybody?
I think you're just going to have to keep the important thing here is keep an eye on Donald Trump's Twitter account. I mean, I think that's going to be the interesting thing to see how he reacts. I mean, clearly, the risk here is that this is the sort of thing that he might react to. And clearly, you have to see this in the broader context of what's been happening over the last 2 weeks. And just bear in mind that essentially Donald Trump has been questioning the one China policy, which by doing that, you're sort of questioning the whole idea of Taiwan and Taiwan's ties to the mainland, as whether it's part of China or not. So this is sort of China's way of getting back at that, and I think they're making a subtle, not too subtle point perhaps, about their determination to continue making the point about where their territorial claims lie and the validity of their territorial claims.